Personally, I think everybody could benefit from the home visiting programs.
I think that as a parent now, I'm grateful for support more than I was before.
I filled out that form not knowing what I was doing. I am very, very grateful that I did it because it's really helping me a lot.
Bueno, creo que por mi parte esperaba algo totalmente diferente, como un programa más frío, por decir algo, no tan cercano a la familia. Y a través del programa nos hemos dado cuenta que también pasa a ser una familia con nosotros porque nos apoya en los momentos difíciles o cuando nos hemos visto en dificultades.
Well, I was a new mom and I had no experience taking care of a newborn.
There isn't like a book on how to raise a kid.
We come from like a lot of family history of, drugs, violence, alcoholism, so we didn't want our daughter to experience any of that.
The thought that a parent was supposed to be loving, nurturing, supposed to be there for their kid, provide food, shelter, joy, and going in, becoming a parent for her, I had no clue how to provide that.
Cómo pensar educarla, cómo educar a un hijo porque pues nosotros nunca, es la primera vez que íbamos a ser padres.
What I think parents should know about home visiting is that you can learn a lot of new things and tips and tricks, how to take care of the baby and what to do, and if you're, stuck in a routine and everything being monotonous, like they give you new resources and new tools how to handle parenthood.
It was nice to have them kind of guiding me, even though I was not a first-time mom. I felt like a first-time mom.
It totally blew my mind over time. So much information that I had no idea about. She was straightforward when, teaching me this stuff and answered any of my questions. Just a really positive experience.
What I think that parents could benefit with the program is just having someone here for you, especially for first-time parents. It can be very isolating and it can be very lonely, and having the home visitor changes that and it feels very good.
For me, having a home visitor is like having a second mom there.
A lot has changed. I'm definitely more knowledgeable taking care of her, and I know that anytime I need advice or help from somebody, I can just call her.
It's just that little positive nudge to, hey, I'm noticing something, let's find a way how to change it. And she's like, you know what, Amanda, let's pick you up, dust you off, and let's go over to, see about either getting your driver's license or seeing about, going to college, see if we can start something for you.
It's totally worth it. Like, even if you're on the fence at first, you don't feel like having a stranger coming in your house and teaching you about your little one, do it anyway. You get the help that you need. You get professional advice on things you may not know about your child. And the fact that the program has no fees or anything, it's all totally free, is fantastic.
Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Roll call, please.
Okay, good morning all. Director Klein.
Present.
Director Gasca.
Here.
Director Navarez is not present. Director McNerlin.
Present.
Director Watt.
Here.
And Vice Chair Crane.
Present. All right. Next, we will undertake approval of the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any questions or concerns, or is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Director Klein.
Aye.
Director Daska.
Aye.
Director Navarez is not here. Director McNerlin.
Aye.
Director Watt.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Crane.
Aye. Public comment on items not on the agenda. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the board. Persons wishing to speak on the specific agenda items should do so at this time. Please limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. Are there any members of the public, online or in the hall, that wish to speak? Seeing none in the hall, are there any online? Hearing of none, we proceed. Item 4, discussion and possible action. Board chair elections. Board to elect board chair and vice chair for the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency Joint Powers Agreement for a 2-year term. Mr. Starkey, would you please proceed? Presentation.
So we're just going to follow Robert's Rules of Order here, and as Doug is the current vice chair, we can accept nominations for a new chair, but more importantly, we need a nomination for a chair, or nominations. You can self-nominate, and it doesn't require a second. And then after we have the panels or the individual nominations set, we'll take a vote, and we'll turn the meeting over to the new chair.
Thank you. I have been serving as the vice chair and would like to continue in that capacity. We have historically had the member who was from the Board of Supervisors be the chair, and I suggest that we continue that process. So I'm going to move that. Is there a second?
Yeah, you don't need a second for that, so for board chair nomination. So we have a panel. Is there another panel that wants to be nominated?
I'm nominating both of those positions.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I'm comfortable with that, but open to input from the rest of our board.
Yes. Is there any concern?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Doug, and I think Madeline would do fine at that. I think that we might consider someone who's been here on the agency a little longer, has given a lot of time and energy to it, and so I think Director Gaska would also serve that well if he would entertain that.
I would entertain that.
As chair.
Okay, and does that include Doug as vice chair?
Yes.
Okay, so we have two panels. Madeline, would you still like to be considered in that capacity? Okay.
Yes, I think just to add some comments to that, I think it's appropriate, especially as we transition to a model with working with the city of Ukiah, and the county should have some sort of oversight and leadership role in that process.
And I add that my being chair would be, in my view, not desirable with the city doing the management. So I have the longest history of all of us with this agency and its formation. But for those reasons, that's why I moved what I moved.
Okay, so we have two competing panels. One, Director Klein and Director Crane as vice chair, Director Klein as chair. Second competing panel, Director Gaska as chair, Director Crane as vice chair. So what we're going to do is just by show of hands, we'll start with the first panel. By show of hands, who would vote for Director Crane and Director Klein? Okay. So that carries the vote.
So we need a voice vote for the record.
Sure.
Roll call, please.
So, sorry, I'm trying to catch up on notes.
We had a 3-2 vote. We didn't take the vote on the second panel, but we can do that. Let's take a vote on the second panel.
That's what I want done.
Okay.
Roll call. For the
Okay,
vote.
fair enough.
So for clarity, the roll call vote right now is for Adam Gaska as chair
No,
and
Klein.
Madeline
Klein
Klein
and
as
Crane.
chair and Doug Crane as vice chair. Okay, one for roll call, Director Klein,
Aye.
Director Gaska,
Nay.
Director McNerlin,
Aye.
Director Watt,
No.
and Vice Chair Crane.
Aye. All right. The meeting moves to you. So,
Okay, congratulations,
this.
Director Klein.
Thank you. And I want to thank Director Watt and Director Gaska for their comments and their interest in the role, and we'll be working closely together. So thank you. All right, where are we? Moving along to 4B, Groundwater Sustainability Fee Direct Billing Threshold.
Thank you. So at the last board meeting, we had a discussion about the efficiency of issuing low-value bills. We talked about why they exist. We got direction to set that at $20. So in other words, any bills less than $20 we're not going to issue. We're not going to issue. From a financial standpoint, it has a very de minimis impact. It is a slight loss of revenue, but I think it's less than $1,000. You have in your board packet a resolution that dignifies that threshold, and it is indexed to increase over time, and so we offer that to the board for your consideration.
Yeah, this is just common sense, and I think it was actually like $400 and something, and the staff time would clearly cost more than that. So, little discussion, and I just move to approve.
second.
Is there any other discussion from the board? Call for public comment. Is there any public comment online?
I'm not seeing any public comment online.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Director Klein,
Aye.
Director Gaska,
Aye.
Director McNerlin,
Aye.
Director Watt,
Yes.
and Director Crane.
Aye.
And just for clarity, that second was from Director Crane. Thank you. The motion carries with all ayes.
Thank you. Moving now to 4C, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Upper Russian River Groundwater Dependent Ecosystem and Interconnected Surface Water Grant Agreement.
Thank you. So again, this was discussed at the prior board meeting. The GSA has received a sizable grant from CDFW to do an interconnected surface water study, $1.4 million in round numbers. And in order to affect the contract relationship with CDFW, we need this board to adopt a resolution, 2025-02, to enter into an agreement with CDFW for this study, and we offer that to you for your consideration.
Director McNerlin.
I move to adopt resolution 2025-02 to enter in an agreement
Crane
with
seconds.
CDFW.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, just a quick.
Absolutely.
I noticed that the grant manager is listed as Mr. Starkey here, and given that there might be some changes in how this agency is administered, do you see any issue with Fish and Wildlife making a change to that down the road if and when that becomes relevant?
Yeah, no, I think we would do that as soon as the city executes the their contract, and which we're going to get into in a little bit. My understanding from Sean and the team is they will take that up in February for approval, and so at that time I think we would transition. By the way, it's my pleasure to introduce Blake Adams, serving this capacity going forward. I think you're in capable hands, but the plan would be to switch over to their designee in that regard.
yes, staff doesn't see any issues on the CDFW side on making that a smooth transition.
All right, any other questions, comments from the board? Roll call vote, please.
Directors Klein.
Aye.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin.
Aye.
And Director Watt.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Moving on to item 4D, fiscal year 24-25 budget adjustment. General Manager.
While I'm looking for this, one of the things that we have tried to do since I came into this chair was try to get better alignment between the agency's budget. If you look at it on the website, you'll see line items for all the various tasks that we're involved in. And and the main change to that, here we go. The main adjustment, and I want to make sure we're not talking about a budget amendment, we're not talking about adding money. All we're talking about is kind of a reshuffling, but also an infusion of cash from the grant that we're going to be entering into with CDFW. So that's the largest budget adjustment that we're making, is now we're booking revenue from the grant and a corresponding expense. So it's revenue neutral, but that was not reflected in the grant. We've also, the board did authorize some money for transition services. That was not in the budget. Transition services are the services West Yost to assist the city in taking over the administrative services. And there also wasn't perfect alignment between the letter proposal that you had approved for West Yost and kind of the line items in that budget. So we're just getting alignment between those two things. Again, no new money. I guess the other thing I would add is we did move some money around to produce the RFP for the consultant selection on the ISW work. So we have to publish an RFP, get a consultant to do that work, and we moved some money out of the TAC budget line item down to grant administration. So you'll see, I think $12,000 was the movement there, Indigo. He's nodding yes. So anyways, this is we do have a corresponding resolution with this budget adjustment. It is 2025-03, and offer that to the board for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Yes, Director Watt.
Yeah, thanks for making this realignment. It's a lot easier to track this way. How are these adjustments of the moving of money out of one task into another related to the RFP, some other things? Is that really just to accommodate the last bit of work that West Yost is doing, or is that also in relation to work that the new administrator would be doing? How does the future role of the city play into this adjustment?
Yeah, this was largely, I mean, we looked at this as if West Yost is going to continue on. Obviously, that's going to stop at some point, and those task budgets will then be the I guess, for lack of better words, the inspiration of the city, what they need to do certain tasks. But it's for the board also, so that you can see where costs ended up with West Yost. How you have a tracking mechanism. We were working under, for example, a $12,000 budget to do the RFP. How did we do on that? We had $15,000 for transition services. I don't think we're going to use nearly that, but nevertheless, you'll be able to see now that with these adjustments how we tracked against those budget targets.
And I would add, I think we anticipate the level of effort most likely being relatively similar for the work that West Yost has done versus the work that the city has done. And so these adjustments would transition appropriately with the city taking on administrative services, and that level of effort isn't anticipated to change.
Did we answer your question, Director Watt?
Yeah, the last thing that Indigo said that didn't reconcile, though, because I'm pretty sure the city's proposal has a same level of effort, but a different level of.
That's right. In working with them on their budget, you know, we had suggested that they just use the hours that we had computed to do all the individual tasks, and then of course they're going to be doing that work at a lower unit rate than we are. So there's cost savings associated with that, but yeah, that's right.
I move the recommended action.
Did we already have a motion for approval on this item? No, okay.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Crane.
Present.
Director
I knew that. Yes.
Aye.
Director Gaska. Director McNerlin.
Aye.
Director Watt.
Yes.
And Chair Klein.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Moving now to item 4E, City of Ukiah Administrative Services Contract.
Okay, so the board directed the city and to develop an agreement for the transition of this services. We've been working diligently to get that prepared so that you could have it today for consideration. Chronic was the lead, was the laboring war in kind of doing this. And I would ask, is Holly on the line?
Holly's not on the line, but Lauren Jones and Jonathan Weldon with Chronic are both online.
Okay, so I would call on either one of them to just kind of provide an overview of this process and what it is that we're putting in front of the board of directors today for consideration.
Yeah, I actually helped work on that contract quite a bit. So Lauren, I'm happy to speak to the board on this one. So the problem that we had with completing the contract at this stage was that the JPA, the Joint Powers Agreement that the GSA operates under, does not allow the board to transfer certain fiscal roles to the city of Ukiah currently. The way that the JPA agreement is written is that the county of Mendocino shall serve as those roles. So what we've done is we've transferred the general manager role and effectively all other services to the city of Ukiah under the current agreement, with the understanding that later on in this meeting I'll present on another change to the JPA, which involves the Upper Russian River Water Agency disbanding, and there'll be some changes surrounding that. So when those changes happen, we will also amend the JPA to allow the board to appoint any member of the GSA and the Joint Powers Authority, so including the city of Ukiah. So this way, as we move forward, if the board chooses to present or chooses to appoint a different member of the GSA for that position, it can do so without a subsequent amendment to the JPA. So we're waiting for those subsequent changes to happen. We're expecting that all to happen before the next board meeting. And again, I have more to report on other changes to the JPA agreement, and that will come later on in the meeting. If there's any other questions, I welcome those questions from the board.
I have a question.
Director McNerlin.
So I only had one. So it'd be under general terms and conditions. Agreement, it's 2, and then item B, independent contractor. In reading this, it just kind of didn't settle well with me. It's the second sentence. UVB GSE shall not have right to and shall not control the manner or prescribe the method of accomplishing those services contracted to and performed by the city under this agreement. And it goes on to say which are not policy or do not require board approval. So that just kind of raised a little bit of concern for me that we would have zero control if we see something that might raise a red flag, or like, well, couldn't you do this more efficiently a different way? Or, you know, it completely ties the hands of the board to have any input, something like that.
Yeah, so the independent contractor provision is fairly standard in a contract like this, and it also has carried over from the previous administrative services contract that the GSA had with West Yost. And really what that language is trying to accomplish is it's preventing the city of Ukiah from effectively becoming an employee of the GSA, in which case there would be a whole bunch of other legal obligations that would attach to that. So that provision just makes clear that they are serving a role that is it's a very specific purpose. It is not fully controlled by the GSA in a way that would effectively make the city become some sort of quasi employee of the GSA, and it just reflects the party's understanding that the agreement should not be construed in that way. If we can always speak about this following the meeting and see if there's a way to tweak that language a little bit that is more comfortable for the board, but it is important language to maintain nonetheless, again, to prevent an employee-employee relationship from arising from the agreement.
Can I think what Teresa's speaking to is just kind of this perception that the board wouldn't have a management function with the city, in other words. And I assume that in the agreement there is termination clauses, that this relationship is, I don't know, for lack of better words, at will, or am I mistaken in that, Jonathan?
I'd have to review that.
No, it is. It's a 90-day termination,
Yeah.
or if both parties agree to terminate sooner than that. So, yeah.
So I don't know if that gives you comfort in knowing that, you know, if for whatever reason, if Blake and Sean go off the rails and this isn't going in the direction you want, you can always take that up as an approach to, you know, dealing, you know. My perception is they're going to be very responsive and want to have they want to work in concert and as a team with the board of directors. So I don't know if that gives you comfort in terms of understanding that language.
I'm not afraid of anyone going off the rails.
Yeah.
Let's put that out there. But, you know, in my experience, let's say they're going to collect fees, and the rate for them to collect fees is 20% higher than how we're collecting fees now. And so,
But that's something you set, not the city. You guys will be setting the fee.
So, no, the way in which they collect the fee. The way in which they would collect the fee.
Okay.
This is just an example, generic example.
Okay.
Right? So we would say, hey, you know, the cost has gone up because the way you're doing it, different than how we did it before. And so, you know, it almost seems like this would tell us, no, you can't tell them how to collect the fee. It's totally within their right to collect it however they want. And I understand needing to have legal terminology in order to clearly define the city as not being an employee. I get that. But at the same time, you know, is there a way for us to have a little bit of input and dialogue without them completely dismissing our concerns because of this contract and how it's written?
I do recall, I believe there are other provisions in the contract that at least reflect the parties' understanding that there'll be some collaboration and that the parties will work together. I know that control word might sound particularly scary, but again, that happens to be one of the exact words that is used in the legal standard for this type of issue. Again, if we'll have to think on this more, but we can consider ways maybe to address specific concerns that the board has, so that we can bring attention to those those issues specifically in the contract without, compromising this broader purpose of that provision. So we're happy to, accept considerations or specific concerns, maybe such as the fee collecting regime that you brought up, so that we can maybe clarify the agreement in that way. But of course, that would require more legal work and potentially delaying this further. I'm not sure if Harry, if you had anything to add to that.
That was a generic example. I'm not pointing that out specifically at all. That was just a generic example.
Okay.
I was going to clarify that the way fees are administered is established under the fee resolution as separate authority. So I know that's
not specific at all.
Yeah, you're referencing what's the compensation to the city for this, and them coming back to you and saying, whoops, we thought, you were going to get some savings, it's double. You know what I mean? So I think that's what you're referring to. Yeah, right.
Director Gasca?
Yeah, this is just a comment. Just a comment, I guess, with Teresa's concern that, I think in part it's also we do have one point of contact, whoever the administrator is, and this kind of makes that clear that, that is where we have input into the administrator and to this contractor. Without it, then, I think it's really to prevent micromanaging their staff. Which I think is, this language is pretty standard. So we're not going to Sean or other staff, or just, it keeps everybody in their lane, basically.
Director Watt?
Thank you. In reading the agreement, on page 10, paragraph Y, survival, there's a reference to a paragraph 9, conflict of interest. Can you point me where that I could find that in the contract? I searched around.
I'm looking at that now. Again, this agreement was largely based on the existing language under the agreement with West Yost. There's a chance that there was a paragraph 9 that was removed toward the very end of our negotiations with the city of Ukiah and their city attorney. So let me take a look at that now.
Yeah, my comment would be it seems reasonable to have a paragraph covering that topic.
Yeah, so there are paragraphs covering those topics. It looks like what happened is a formatting issue. So when the sub items had indented inward, they had become letters rather than numbers. That's a little clerical error that we can clean up today. And so there is a section of the agreement addressing ownership of documents, indemnification, and conflicts of interest. It's just the parenthetical references need to be changed, and I appreciate you raising that point. We will fix that.
What page is that on?
So the ownership of documents is discussed on page 7, beginning with item L. And the conflict is discussed. There's a portion of it on page 9, item T. Oh, actually, no, excuse me, that is not the conflict of interest provision. That may have also been another provision that was removed toward the end here. Let me also look for the indemnification. That should be there. And the indemnification clause is on page 2. That is item 4, IV. So maybe we also need to remove the reference to conflict of interest because it looks like that was removed. So with those changes, would the board, would that address your concerns?
Dr. Watt.
Yeah, I guess, can we hear your rationale for why the conflict of interest provision isn't necessary in this agreement?
Yeah, so those were, that was probably a change that happened toward the end when Holly Roberson was negotiating with the city attorney of the city of Ukiah. I was not privy to those conversations, so I would have to follow up with Holly and potentially the city attorney for the city of Ukiah on the discussion regarding the conflict of interest piece.
Director McNerlin.
Who's on the ad hoc committee for this? Anyone sitting here? Is anyone sitting here on the ad hoc committee that help with this?
I don't think we engaged the ad hoc on this, Teresa. It was largely an effort by West Yost, Chronic, and the city of Ukiah, along with their attorney, city of Ukiah's attorney.
And I believe the ad hoc was staffed by former Director McGordy and Director Gasca for the early conversations.
I'm just curious what other changes were made that I don't recognize. Other than deleting and eliminating conflict of interest.
Yeah. I don't know that I can speak to that, Director McNerlin.
It's my understanding that there were not any. At least it's to my understanding there are no other substantial changes, and again I'd have to touch base with Holly who wrapped up the last stages of this. We were working our best to get this before the board for this meeting, and I believe the city attorney for the city of Ukiah and Holly met just before we needed to add this into the board packet. So we will make sure to write the board and get you answers to these questions. I'm notating them, and we will clean up that contract language. If the board thinks that these changes need to be implemented before then, we can have that discussion too. And I'm welcome to suggestions on that.
And one approach might be to, subject to these items of concern, if they're adequately resolved to the satisfaction of both council, the GSA, and council of the city of Ukiah, this board, I'm just suggesting, could elect to approve the agreement under those provisions or under those qualifications.
I believe Director Watt had a comment.
Yeah, I'm totally in support of the city's proposal, and having an agreement that is fair to both parties, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think at other prior meetings, and Vice Chair Crane mentioned it, that we have an entity here who's a member agency that is a large user of groundwater, and I think having clear language in an agreement that addresses conflict of interest is important. I don't see it as like a negative thing. So by not having it, I think it maybe creates some unease. And so if we can maybe understand why we wouldn't have it in there, that could help as well. So where I'm at.
I will be sure to follow up with that and those discussions that surrounded why that provision is no longer here.
Director White. Oh, I'm sorry. Director Crane.
Thank you. Lost my train. No, not really. Not really.
Apologies.
No. What's the timeliness issue here? It seems that we should act on this now with the understanding that it needs a bit of cleanup. I want to explore that, and also want to ask Mr. Gasca, who serves on the new agency, JPA, for the combining of the bulk of the water purveyors, if from that point of view he sees any constraints for moving forward today.
I don't see any.
Thank you.
Director McNerlin.
I would feel comfortable approving this today if it was contingent upon it coming back at least to our ad hoc committee and explaining to them any changes or anything else, and having the ad hoc committee go ahead and approve it.
Director Crane.
That would require reconstituting the ad hoc, and I would suspect that you would be the person replacing.
Director Watt.
Yeah, and I don't know what's the most efficient use of resources here, but it seems like, you know, this resolution gives the chair the authorization to sign the agreement. And I don't know if you feel comfortable looking at the final language or not, or if you want the ad hoc to do it. I'm just trying to think of a efficient way to get there.
Let's cover in.
Right. Ultimately, we rely upon the council of our GSA council, and if we're hearing direction from them that this is approved, finalized language, then I think we should trust that.
Yeah, and I didn't get that comfort because the attorney representing us today wasn't involved in those negotiations.
I do have, I was able to find that conflict of interest provision from the previous agreement, and what that provision would have done is just, it would be an acknowledgement by the city of Ukiah that at the time this agreement is executed, it doesn't have any other conflicts of interest. So the provision reads, city covenants that it presently has no interest and shall not have any interest, direct or indirect, which would conflict in any manner with the performance of services under this agreement. So it's a really broad clause, and again, that's something that we can discuss putting back in. And it's really just an acknowledgement from the city saying, we don't have the conflicts here. We're coming into this conflict-free. And I understand your point that it seems like that's a fairly non-controversial clause, and I look forward to getting you more information on that.
Yeah, raises my interest why the city attorney would have that removed then, negotiate to have that removed.
And I can't confirm, to what extent the city attorney commented on that piece. Yeah, I really wish I were privy more to that particular clause, and I was not aware beforehand that was removed, and I'm sorry for not having more information on that.
Sean White has approached the dais.
Should just be auto on, Sean.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wasn't involved with the latest round that happened like on Sunday afternoon, I believe, but it was not at the request of the city to have that deleted. So there were a lot of broad changes that Holly had recommended, and I thought for the most part they were good. I don't know why this was eliminated, but it certainly wasn't at the city's request. And like, I completely understand just the optics of it, if nothing else, from Director Watt's perspective. And from a staff perspective, I'd be completely fine with having that in there, but I actually probably prefer it.
So I'll add my comments. I'm comfortable with either direction that the group would like to go. If they would like to have an ad hoc be involved with this process to finalize, or have the chair lead that activity. So open to input from the board. Director Gasca.
I'm fine with you working with them to finalize the language.
Director Watt?
Yeah, I am as well, and I think and I don't know if we do it through part of the motion or just through consensus, that we, as long as there's no objections from the parties to this agreement, to add back in that clause, I think that's reasonable given what we've heard.
Director Crane?
I think it's more appropriate to do an action. And I would suggest the motion be made by Mr. Watt because he has more specific words that relate to the concerns. Simply suggest.
I'm looking for a motion.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the. Okay, so I recommend the board. I move.
So the motion I am hearing in summary would be for the board to approve the City of Ukiah Administrative Services contract through the approval of the resolution 25-04, along with the chair working with staff to make modifications to insert a conflict of interest.
So moved. Thank you.
Second, Crane.
Looking for a roll call vote.
Roll call. Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin. Director Watt.
Yes.
Chair Klein.
Aye.
So the motion carries.
Thank you all for your discussion on this item. Moving now to 4F, Hansford Economic Consulting Fee Setting Services Contract.
Thank you. So, Hansford Economic Consulting has been, kind of our guiding light in terms of developing the fee and working with the GSA to get those bills issued, et cetera. They are currently out of contract. Their contract expired December 31st of last year. We bring to you a recommendation to amend that contract and to include an additional $24,000 so that they can be utilized in the next round of billing. Catherine's been just very instrumental and key in terms of navigating issues and problems with, and just doing the basic work of administering the fee. So we present that contract amendment to you for consideration. And I think that in the budget cycle, Adam, when we were originally working on it, we had envisioned contracting with Hansford into the next cycle. We did talk with the city to get feedback with them. They saw value also in retaining a relationship with Catherine. So again, we offer that to the board for your consideration.
Director Crane.
It's my understanding that that is establishing a ceiling under the agreement that the charges would be based upon work requested and done.
Same kind of arrangement you have with West Yost, that's right.
I move the recommended action.
Second.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Any public comment? All right, I'm looking for a roll call vote.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin.
Aye.
Director Watt.
Yes.
And Chair Klein.
Aye. Moving now to 4G, Monitoring and Water Year 2024 Annual Report.
All right, good morning, members of the board and other guests. My name is Audra Bardsley. I work with Larry Walker Associates. We provide technical support to the GSA, and I was asked to go ahead and provide a status update for the Water Year 2024 GSB Annual Report. So I will go ahead and do so now. All right. Oh, I'm so sorry. That was the incorrect. I apologize, everyone. That was the incorrect desktop. I intended to share my PowerPoint. I apologize. Okay, that should be the correct window now. So I did want to comment quickly. There was mention in the agenda of the water quality monitoring. So the last time that water quality was collected was in December 2023. I coordinated with the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District. They are charged with coordinating with Blaine Tech, who actually go out and collect the samples from the GSP's network. And so that data has already been covered from December 2023 in a previous meeting. I did learn that samples were collected actually Monday of this week for the next round of sampling. So once that information becomes available, we can review that at a future meeting. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. So every year, the GSA is required by DWR to submit an annual report by April 1st. So this water year 2024 report will encompass the beginning of October 2023 through the end of September 2024, and it will be our 4th annual report that we submitted to DWR after we submitted the initial GSP. So what sorts of things are included? Just as a reminder, we're trying to provide some information to DWR regarding our progress towards achieving sustainability in the Ukiah Valley Basin. So we're going to talk about things like the GSA's progress, efforts, projects towards GSP implementation. So that might include things, for example, like the CDFW grant that was secured for the GSA to carry out the interconnected surface water study. We also are going through and looking at some of those key metrics described by the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in order to evaluate how we're doing in terms of moving towards sustainability. So there are 6 of those factors. Here you can see highlighted in the figure on the right. For the Ukiah Valley Basin, thankfully, subsidence is not a considerable issue, and due to our geography, we don't have to worry about seawater intrusion. So we'll look through in the report and see how we're doing in terms of things like groundwater elevations, potential reduction in storage, the water quality of groundwater in the basin, and then estimating surface water depletion as well. And again, we're going to be comparing these against sustainable management criteria that are described and established in our GSP. Okay. And then we also kind of go through and look at the water budget and tabulate, coordinate with different agencies to understand what the major demands and diversions are in the basin. All right. And so when we look at what sort of data that we need in order to complete the annual report, we coordinate with a variety of different agencies, and each year we go through and gather information from our own monitoring network. So these are different wells that are monitored, for example, by Resource Conservation District that have instruments in them as well. These are areas where we're having Resource Conservation District, again, go out and with Blaine Tech collect water samples for water quality. This might also be information that we are coordinating with Russian River Flood Control. We're coordinating with City of Ukiah in order to obtain data that they collect throughout the year. We also look to different data clearinghouses in order to obtain things like precipitation data and other information like additional water quality throughout the monitoring network. And so again, this is a non-trivial effort to go ahead and coordinate and collect all of this information, but we're very happy and grateful that our partner agencies and other public agencies have been very responsive, and we either have all the data that we need in hand or have it promised very soon by the end of this week or next week. So we're on track, and that is good news. We also have some information that we have to compute or calculate in order to incorporate that into the annual report. So this is, in our case, agricultural water demand is calculated using a model that's part of our integrated hydrologic model. It's not directly measured or reported. And then we also have to calculate or model our estimated change in aquifer storage. All right, so that gives you a sense for some of the information that's key that we report in the annual report every year to DWR, and then also some of the data that we need, and again, our progress in obtaining that. So the end of last year was really focused on acquiring data, compiling it, going through and doing some quality control. We have actually our markdown code that aggregates and generates a PDF of the report. So that's what we're going through, and we update with extended data and information. We change the text to reflect the current water year conditions and efforts that the GSA has made for water year 2024. And so that also required some code updates and other changes due to some changes in the R Markdown code this year. So we went ahead and did that. Now in January and February, we're wrapping up that data collection. Like I said, we have most of the information we need in hand, which is great. We're going through, we've already generated some figures, updated some text, so we'll continue doing so. And our aim is to actually go ahead and submit a draft annual report to the GSA staff and technical advisory committee members by February 24th. So that's a Monday. And so that's in anticipation of an upcoming TAC meeting that will take place on Wednesday, March 5th. So that'll allow about 10 days or so for the TAC and GSA staff to review so that we can discuss more at the TAC meeting. All right, then LWA, we anticipate receiving back feedback both at that meeting and then as necessary directly from TAC members and GSA staff. We'll incorporate that feedback, make revisions to the report, and then go ahead, get that ready for submission by April 1st so that we can meet the deadline. All right, any questions so far kind of about the logistics required to complete the annual report?
Seeing no questions.
All right, so again, I just want to give you a quick preview on what we can expect for the 2024 annual report. So we're going to take a quick look at what the hydrologic sort of drought conditions were like for water year 2024. We're going to summarize the groundwater elevation information that we observed for our representative monitoring point network. And then also cover a couple of changes that have occurred in the network this past year. All right, so in looking at the precipitation that was observed in the Ukiah Valley Basin, we can see data reflecting the total water year precipitation at two locations, so the Potter Valley Powerhouse and at the municipal airport here. And that's precipitation in inches since about 2001. And so when we look through, we can see that for this past water year, 2024, we again, like the year preceding, had above average precipitation. So we know that a couple of years ago, we had very dry conditions and was quite a bit below what the average is, but these last 2 years have been, again, above average. So in looking at how that kind of appears over time and what sort of water year we had according to sort of DWR's classifications, these past 2 years, again, water year 2023 and 2024 were considered above normal. So we weren't all the way pushed into sort of a wet year. We would have even more precipitation, but these were considered above normal, again, right after having a couple of critically low precipitation years. So what did that mean for drought conditions? Mendocino County last water year was out of drought conditions, thankfully, and that status held in water year 2024. Again, largely due to that much higher precipitation that the valley received. All right, so again, we talked briefly about this idea that there are 6 sustainability indicators described by the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Right now, we're going to look at groundwater elevation and see how those conditions are looking in the basin over this past water year, with a focus on fall 2024, because that's when we typically see the lowest groundwater elevations in the water year. We've had a long, dry summer, and we're waiting for that water year precipitation to come in. All right, so here is a quick summary of our representative monitoring point network. These are locations for which we have established sustainable management criteria in the GSP. So we have metrics against which we can compare the groundwater level fluctuations and get a sense for how we're doing in terms of our sustainability progress. We do have additional wells in the network that are not currently part of our representative monitoring point network because they do not yet have sustainable management criteria defined. The objective is to collect data over these years, and then in the 2027 periodic evaluation, when we have a chance to sort of look back, review, and update our GSP in January 2027, the hope is that we can establish some criteria for many of these wells and incorporate them into the representative monitoring point network. So you'll notice that these gold sites are all in the network. but you'll see that there are 2 sites for which we have this magenta color. Those were lost from the network. That was either due to a construction project in the case of this mid-basin location that destroyed the well. And then we'll see that in terms of updates in the next slide, this location had permission revoked by the owner just this past summer. Okay, so in looking at how we dealt with those 2 losses in past years, we've brought to the board and let them know that we went ahead and coordinated with City of Ukiah to incorporate this Ukiah Valley 36 location as a suitable substitute or replacement for this destroyed site. Again, we'll have to establish management criteria for those in the future updates to the GSP. And in order to accommodate sort of pivot, now that we had lost access to this location in August 2024, we fortunately discovered that there was a site nearby that had been previously monitored during GSP development. It was only about 1,000 feet away, which is great. And it was also completed to a similar depth. So it really was an ideal candidate to substitute in. We had a very cooperative landowner who also has others of his wells in the network. As another update, we had 3 additional sensors and telemetry installed throughout the basin. We gave a much more thorough update on that topic to the TAC, but I just wanted to mention that briefly here. All right. So in thinking about comparing to the sustainable management criteria, I wanted to briefly remind the board of the 3 separate indicators that were developed using historical conditions for these wells and sort of what these indicate and when we maybe start to be concerned about the groundwater elevations. So the trigger level, this is just sort of a check. It's a way to look at how groundwater elevation looks after spring recharge, at which time the groundwater elevation should be its highest point for the year, and sort of see if things are looking like they're on track. This is not regulatory, it's just a guideline for the GSA. Then we have the measurable objective. So this is the value that was established in the GSP to see whether a particular site is on track to achieve sustainability within the next 20 years. So if water levels are, often above this threshold, that well is in very good shape. By contrast, we have this minimum threshold. So we can think of this like the basement. We don't want water levels to fall below this defined groundwater elevation. That's when we start to be concerned, think about actions that might be taken to help keep the basin on track for achieving sustainability. As many of you know, and we've seen through data, the basin does typically recharge really well every winter when there's sufficient precipitation. And so, as we'll see, this typically only happens at the very end of a dry summer and only at select locations. And it's important to note that if we have a well that dips below the minimum threshold, this basement, briefly, that doesn't mean that we're in non-compliance. And we actually have defined in the GSP what would be considered an undesirable result or the sort of non-compliance. And we have to have more than 1/3 of the representative monitoring points in the basin fall below their minimum thresholds for 2 consecutive years. Okay. So again, we have 7 locations. So we're going to take a quick look as we wrap this up at some of the preliminary monthly field measurements for these different hydrographs. Hydrographs are going to describe the groundwater elevation through time at our different monitoring sites. So you will see some sites, especially one in particular that we know about and been tracking, do have pretty pronounced seasonal lows. Again, we typically see good recovery after a rainy season. Again, those issues with the seasonal lows tend to be more problematic in the kind of northern part of the basin. All right. And so we, again, are going to be working on the model so we can look more into these. We have an idea about what's happening at one of the sites. We've had very helpful input from partner and member agencies. But again, these are issues we can continue to explore using the model. So this is the Ukiah Valley Integrated Hydrologic Model. All right, so I'm going to step through our sites now and sort of give a quick check on how things are looking, and then we can wrap it up. All right, so this location, you can see here, is the southernmost in the basin. And I just want to call out that there was a gap in data collection due to a change in ownership of this property. And so we had to work to reestablish a landowner access agreement so that RCD could continue visiting this location. We did reestablish it. We actually have now installed a sensor to measure groundwater levels and telemetry. So that's great news, but we do have a gap, which is why I think you do not see the same spring high observed that we had last year, simply because those measurements, those months, we were not able to get access to the location. But again, we're staying above this measurable objective. This site's on track. Things are looking good. So we're going to move up into the basin a little bit more. And so we're looking at this location. Again, we see good recovery in the springtime where we have high levels way above that trigger point. Again, that's just a reference value, and we're well above that measurable objective. Things are looking good. A similar situation here, another site, Ukiah Valley 10A. So again, moving up the basin, a little more mid-basin. Spring high is looking good, and even when we go and visit in the fall, values are well above that measurable objective. So we're kind of ticking through, things are looking good. So this is a site where we know that we've had a multi-year sort of excursion below that basement value, that minimum threshold. And again, observations from Sean White and other folks indicate this is very likely due to pumping at a very nearby well that was not operational, is my understanding, during much of these preceding years, where observations were being made and the sustainable management criteria were being developed. And so this is something that we're watching and we're thinking about as we approach that 2027 periodic update. All right, so here is, again, our northernmost site that's in Redwood Valley. So I have truncated this record just to focus on the past 20 years or so that we can see in a bit more detail what's happening. So this year we did not get recovery above the measurable objective, and in fact, largely stayed below that threshold for the entire year. This is not non-compliance. This is not even deviation below the minimum threshold. But again, it's something that we keep an eye on, especially interesting because we did have an above average rain year and the groundwater elevation did not rise above our measurable objective. All right, so here is another location, also monitored by DWR like this one. So again, the last measurement I believe was taken at this site in August 2024, and the landowner has chosen to revoke permission to access the site. So this is sort of the last set of data that we will have for this location. But again, it's another one that's in good shape. We have spring highs that are above the trigger level. And this year we didn't deviate below the measurable objective. So things are looking good. And again, we hope to sort of continue this very long record by looking at our new site, Ukiah Valley 27. Okay, and so this is again one of those substitute sites that we brought in. We have not yet established sustainable management criteria, but we can see that there was again good spring recovery at this municipal mid-basin well, and we will be evaluating this data further when we develop sustainable management criteria, again for the 2027 periodic update. So that gives you a quick idea of sort of the details that go into determining the conditions of these representative monitoring points, how we compare them against the sustainable management criteria. So I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of the conditions for fall 2024. Again, much of the basin, especially the southern basin, is right on track. Things are looking good. Measurements were either near or above the measurable objective. We don't have a comparison for this municipal well / Ukiah Valley 36. We got to establish those criteria in the future. This was the location where we did have deviation below the minimum threshold. Again, we think due to nearby pumping of wells. And then this northernmost site in Redwood Valley, again, not a situation where it's below the minimum threshold, but something to keep an eye on and look at as we move forward. So again, overall, we are not in an undesirable result situation. These northernmost wells tend to have the lowest sort of dry season dips, but overall, we're in pretty good shape. All right. So again, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for your attention and patience as I sort of stepped through. This gives you a nice preview of the type of information that will be included in the annual report and that we'll be sharing in more detail when we present with the tag, present to the TAC coming up in March. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Crane?
The threshold is arbitrarily set by the regulation. Over the years, we've spoken about the need and what the process may be to move that threshold. We sit in a basin that is 600 plus feet above sea level. Saltwater intrusion is not an issue.
Yep.
We sit on a landform that is heavy alluvial materials, highly washed, containing a lot of water. It is therefore not particularly subjected to contraction when it loses its water. So subsidence is not really an issue. When the legislation was developed, we were relying primarily, I'm speaking of the city, and I believe significant part of the water user base is represented there, utilizing riparian water, not groundwater. So it seems that we need to stay focused on how do we move that threshold down to be more representative of what we have in the way of a resource that could be used without crossing into the problems that the legislation was designed to prevent. So I think it's important for this body to keep that in mind, and for us at every turn to do what we can with the language of our reports, with our requests for grants, at every step be pushing, efforting that movement of that threshold. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crane. Any other comments, questions?
Hi, Sean White again. Yeah, I mean, if it weren't for that one red one, they'd all be green. And the only reason that red one is red is because we've had a significant change in circumstances there. So the baseline that existed previously is somewhat irrelevant to what's actually occurring now. There's a new Millview well literally less than 20 feet away from that site, and you can expect that the Kona depression is absolutely to overlap that adjacent well. I think really, as we watch that over time, we can at the TAC or at the board recommend a new set of thresholds for that represent the new baseline and just move forward with that. And if we did that, again, they would all be green. There's no real downward trend now that Millview is using it. It's just all happening at a different elevation. And I think another year or two, and like Audra was referring to during the next version of our GSP, we can probably update it at that time. We'll have a number of years of data, and then everything will be green. I mean, in the end of the day, if you look at the quantities that were listed in the GSP for Basin 1 and 2 and our annual use, it is really like Ross Perot used to say, sand off a beach. We're barely, we're maybe extracting 8,000 acre feet a year in total with ag and municipal out of a basin as likely somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 acre feet. So something really crazy would have to happen for this to become unsustainable. But I do think just adjusting that one site over time because it's eye-catching, even though it's the anthropogenic effect from a change condition be a smart thing to do, just so we don't have to keep explaining it. But otherwise, yeah, I think the results look like what I'd expect. I think we're overall in a community in great shape, especially if you look at what's happening in the areas where things happen that actually drove this regulatory regime. We're in a good place. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Director McNerlin.
So sort of to Director Crane's comments, but we were just on the threshold of being a medium priority from a low priority, and a low priority requires a lot less of our community dollars to monitor the groundwater. And unfortunately, if you go to the state website, they have no future basin prioritization projects planned to take another look and see where people lie, low, medium, or high. But I think we need to stay on our state legislators to make sure that at some point, maybe 5 years, from 3 years from now, which would be like 5 years, where they can prioritize these again. Because, I don't know, you can't really look up everything they looked at to make the did they look back? Did they accumulate 20 years? Did they accumulate the last 10 years, the last 5 years? And our community is in a tough position right now. So just encourage everyone to stay on our state representatives to take another look at the prioritizations.
Thank you. General Manager.
And I really am tuned into what you're saying, Teresa, and wanted to just let you know that we've plugged Blake into the small GSA group that is precisely working on what you're suggesting, advocacy in front of the legislature for some of the issues financially, and just why are we having to do so frequent reporting when you see what's happening. So Blake was introduced to the group. He'll be participating in that group going forward, and they're very effective in terms of strategizing to get in front of the legislature to actually hammer home the points that you're making.
See a hand raised online from Laurel Marcus.
Good to hear.
Hi, thank you. I have a question for Audra on how you're calculating agricultural water use. Because it's my understanding on the first round of this, you just assumed that all the water use for agriculture was groundwater. We have, and if that's not true, please correct me, but we have very good numbers now from reported water use of surface water. And it seems like if you're using like a crop coefficient of so much acre feet per acre per year, you could take the surface water out of that and get a better number for the groundwater. Instead of making assumptions because there's no groundwater pumping data.
So we do, Laura, why don't you speak to that?
Okay, no, Laura, totally, you are totally on point, and that's exactly what we are working on, really, because we got these, and Audra, you know better, but we got all this information from the state water board, but it's taking some time to kind of assign. So we are working on assigning the diversion to the right sub-watershed, the right location, so that then we can do exactly what you are suggesting. We will have a total, it's just not possible for this annual report because we just got the data from the board.
Okay, but you
it's
did
coming.
get it.
It's coming, yeah.
Because it's, and I'd be happy to send you the information that was used, for example, in the water sharing program. So we're all using the same numbers, but they used 17, 18, 19 to establish demand. And that is what the state board is using. And they're also, I think, going to use 24 when they run their DRAP model for curtailment. So it kind of makes sense that we have all of us are using the same set of numbers, because even though the models are different, we do want to be able to look at how, conjunctive use might work out. And frankly, whether you can use all groundwater in a drought and have any effect. I mean, that's kind of a big question out there.
Yeah.
And so just to clarify, we do not assume that all agricultural demand is met by groundwater.
Okay.
So we do make some assumptions. Again, those assumptions were developed during the GSP, and we're actively working with you on the project and then separately to try to improve the division of ag demand between surface water and groundwater.
Yeah, well, and that's changing so dramatically now with the PVP changes. So, yes, hopefully at some point in the future when the B of R grant has its scenarios further along, we can report that to the GSA. All right, thank you.
Laurel?
All right, any other comments, questions from the audience? Seeing no one online, no further action is needed on this report.
All right, thank you so much.
Moving on to item 4H, upcoming potential joint powers agreement amendments.
And if Jonathan's there, I'll lean on you, Jonathan, to report on this. You've kind of touched upon it to some degree already.
Yes, thanks, Harry. And good morning to the newly appointed chair and vice chair and members of the board. So the GSA legal counsel became aware, I believe about the same time that the GSA became aware in November that the Upper Russian River Water Agency is disbanding as a public agency, meaning they will no longer exist. That's very relevant for this GSA because they are a member of the GSA, since the GSA operates under a joint powers authority. And one of those members is, one of the 4 current members is the Upper Russian River Water Agency. So first and foremost, the JPA agreement that governs, I mean, we spoke about it previously with the fiscal responsibilities transferring to the city of Ukiah, for example. It governs GSA operations and lists who the members are and the extent of the authority of the GSA. And since this member is disbanding, the JPA, of course, the JPA agreement needs to be amended. And the plan at this point is to make those changes simultaneous with adding the Ukiah Valley Water Authority or Agency. The Ukiah Valley Water Authority is effectively going to sub for the Upper Russian River Water Agency. So to be efficient, to save legal costs, the plan right now is to amend the JPA agreement to add the Ukiah Valley Water Authority. At the same time, we remove the Upper Russian River Water Agency from the agreement so that it doesn't cause any further complications with board composition, for example, since the JPA agreement currently has 1 board member per member agency. So, for example, if we just add in the Ukiah Valley Water Authority now, that's going to change the board composition to add another member. The Upper Russian River Water Authority would still be there. So we can basically do a swap if we do that at the same time. Now that comes up against also the fiscal part of the administrative services contract with the city of Ukiah. So as I mentioned previously, we will need to amend the JPA agreement to give authority to the board to appoint the city of Ukiah or any other member agency moving forward to serve in the treasurer and controller roles for the GSA. So our plan is to make all of those changes in advance of the next board meeting. One contingency right now is that the JPA also requires for a member agency to withdraw from the agreement 60 days notice. So we've advised that if we can request from the Upper Russian River Water Agency 60 days notice of their withdrawal from the agreement in advance of their disbandment, that would allow the GSA to move forward adding the Ukiah Valley Water Authority in the event the Upper Russian River Water Agency doesn't disband, before the next board meeting as we're contemplating. The timeline for that is still unclear as far as I'm concerned. There may have been some very recent information, But we would like the Upper Russian River Water Agency to move forward with providing the GSA 60 days notice of their withdrawal from the agreement. So in 60 days from now, we can amend the JPA and add the Ukiah Valley Water Authority. And that's the summary of it. And if there are any more specific questions, I will welcome those.
Thank you. I'll turn now to Sean White.
Yeah, hi, it's me again. So as we were talking about amendments to the JPA for other things, I just brought this topic up because it seems like a likely trajectory, although we have no formal recommendation from either board yet as to whether or not this will happen. But in conversations, at least at a staff level and with some electeds on either board, this seems sort of like a likely trajectory. I've been working with Jared Walker, who is basically the staff person running IRWA right now, to sort of pull the membership and see if this is the way they would like to go. If IRWA wants to go that way, then we'll pull people to the Water Authority if they'd like to sort of assume that position. And so then we'll be ready without another round of legal modifications to the EA.
Director McNerlin.
I'd only have one recommendation because the new JPA would be the city of Ukiah, Willow, and
Redwood and Millview.
Redwood and Millview.
Yep.
Okay. So those four, I would ask this board to have something that prevents the city of Ukiah from having 2 seats on this board, plus being a treasurer. So virtually having the power of 3, right? I think that you need to have somebody on this board that represents the water districts as well as the city of Ukiah.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly reasonable request, and I would support as well.
Director Watt.
Yeah, I appreciate Merlin's words there. I think even at the formation of this agency, the GSA that is, there was, IRWA had some different membership, and the same discussion came up then about members on IRWA also having independent representations. I don't know how you do that in the JPA documents. I don't know how you get that memorialized, but I think it makes sense.
Director Gaska.
Yeah, I'm on the Ukiah Valley Water Authority, and I think probably the easiest would be for us just to have a policy of whoever we appoint not be the city of Ukiah.
Thank you. I'm in agreement. Any other comments or questions?
I just want to comment on the timing of this. So we're presenting this as a informational item of things that might be upcoming in the future. Staff, both West Joe staff as well as City of Ukiah staff, are tracking this, working with Jared Walker as Sean advised. And so if this is ready, this would be potentially coming before your board at the next board meeting on April 10th, but could also be delayed further depending on the timing of all of the agencies involved.
I would only follow up on that last recommendation. It might be something to consider to actually make that that restriction broader, because the Water Authority has enough members that some other member agencies may also already have a representative. So maybe that no agency that's a member of IRWA that already has a seat on the board has an opportunity for essentially double representation.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Elizabeth Solomon online.
Hello, everyone. Just a reminder that originally the Russian River Flood Control District was a member of IRWA and also had an independent seat on the GSA board. So as Director Watt noted, there is some precedent for that language in the JPA document. I know a lot of you are newer and weren't around for those many years ago, so I thought I would just bring that to your attention.
Thank you. All right, is there any other comments, public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to item 5, consent items. Is there a motion for the proposed consent items?
Move the consent items.
Second.
All right, looking for a roll call vote.
Okay, so that was a motion by Director Watt and a second by Director Gasca. And for roll call, we have Directors Crane,
Aye.
Director Gasca,
Aye.
Director McNerlin,
Aye.
Director Watt,
Yes.
Chair Klein.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving now to item 6, staff and GSA partner update. I believe we're going to begin with the general manager.
Thank you. So we'll be leaving this meeting and in very short order turning out an RFP to do a consultant selection for the ISW work. So that's on our to-do list. I do want to also make mention that this is kind of bittersweet for Indigo and I. This may be the last meeting we see you guys. Blake will be in this seat next time, and so on behalf of West Jost, we've appreciated to be able to be of service to you, and we're not going away. John, Blake, we're going to be here, help you with the transition, make it as smooth as possible, and we just want to express our gratitude for the opportunity to serve the GSA. Thank you.
Director Crane.
I want to thank you and your staff for doing what I think has been a very good job on our behalf. Appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving now to updates from GSA Legal Counsel.
Yeah, so we've covered the primary updates at this point. I see that DWR is following. We did receive just some very general updates regarding Sigma, but seeing that DWR is going to present, I imagine that they might provide that same level of generality. There's nothing specific for the GSA that we've identified. 10 years of Sigma has just passed, so there's that to celebrate. Otherwise, I also want to chime in to thank West Yost for all that they've done, not only to assist the GSA, but to work so collaboratively with Chronic, and I've seen in the short time that I've been assisting the GSAs with legal work, just how imperative that they are, and we look forward to working with them as they transition here toward the city of Ukiah. And that's really all I had. Thanks so much.
I have one quick general manager operation and or legal update. Just as a quick reminder, there was a new Senate bill that was passed this last legislative cycle that establishes some new requirements for Form 700s for GSA board members. I believe we sent out an email about this new system for submittal of Form 700. So I just wanted to put a reminder that that process is tweaking slightly out there based off of that new legislation.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? All right, moving to updates from Department of Water Resources and State Water Resources Control Board.
Hi. Yeah, so as your council said, we had 10 years of Sigma, which is exciting. So both CNRA and DWR held 10-year anniversary events, and those are both online. As far as our facilitation support services go, my last update on that was that our consultant and I believe your technical advisory committee were working together to look at the contract language, what the goals were. And then we just have a few other things that I wanted to highlight. So this isn't necessarily for the GSA, but people within your area. We have a underrepresented communities and small farmers technical assistance program. And it can help with things like groundwater level monitoring, aquifer testing, identifying groundwater dependent ecosystems, well interference, additional well supply, well condition using downhole video logging, rehab, water storage tank, many other things. So if anyone's interested in that, you can email sgm_ta@water.ca.gov, or you can just look me up. I'm, again, Dominic Blum-Gutierrez. So if you look up my name and DWR, you'll find my contact info. And I'm always happy to talk to the public and point you to our grant people. And then our interconnected surface water guidance was published. So all 3 papers now have been released. We already had the first paper out, but now we have the second and third paper on estimating interconnected surface water depletion and interconnected surface water depletion caused by groundwater use. So once you select a consultant to look at that, I think they'll find that helpful. And then this is kind of new. We have this Basin Characterization Exchange program coming soon. And the idea of that is it'll be a community of practitioners, GSAs, their consultants and staff to exchange ideas and lessons learned. And it's open to federal, state, and local agencies, as well as consultants, tribes, non-governmental organizations, et cetera. But to the Director McNerlin's point, as far as I've heard, there is no plan to actually recharacterize basins. And then we have a new module on our Sigma portal. So that's a PMA module. So your projects and management actions, when you do your annual report, you can also provide information on what projects and management actions updates are happening. So we're going to send out more information in the next 2 weeks on that. And then our 2023 statewide cropping map data has been released, and that was released in December of 2024. I believe Hansford Economic Consulting uses some of this data in assigning different categories. And then our INSAR subsidence data is now available through July 1st of 2024, and that's everything. So yeah, that's all my updates. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them or to get you an answer in the future if I don't have an answer right now.
Director Gasca?
Yeah, you mentioned the DWRs updating the cropping data, and I know that that's how we base or determine the agricultural fee. And so I'm wondering what's the easiest way for like our producers, because I'm anticipating people following land, you know, especially the condition of the wine industry. And so how do they go about updating? Is it easier to go through our own county, you know, to have acreage removed, or go through DWR just so that they can also, you know, relieve themselves from the fees from GSA?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple things to say. Like, while we know that you are using it for fees, and we know that other agencies do the same, that's like not the intent of this data. It's a scientific data set, and the data is actually gathered from satellite. And so we have Land IQ. We've contracted with them, and basically they take data, I believe, from some NASA satellites and then run it through some algorithms to characterize what crops are growing. And then we actually have staff scientists further refine that data. So other people who are customers of Land IQ might have a slightly different data set. We go through a pretty extensive QA/QC process, looking at all the different crops, multi-cropping, things like that. So it's not your farmers, just the act of following that land, it will be picked up by the satellites. They don't have to do anything. But again, there is a bit of a lag, right? This is 2023 data coming out in 2024, at the end of 2024. So that's kind of the lag you can expect. And we do, I guess, one other thing is we did update our Land IQ contract. I believe it's for 5 years. So that wasn't necessarily clear that we'd have that data in the future, but now we've, we've locked that contract in. So we will continue to provide that data.
Great. From the fee perspective, I just wanted to comment to Director Gasca's question. I would say and this has happened, we didn't really report out on fee appeals, but we have been receiving some appeals. That's the easiest way to capture that lag that Dominic was referencing, is if land has been fallowed in the interim. We're trying for the fee to capture the most recent kind of groundwater picture. And so if a fee appeal comes in that if land has been fallowed, that we're still using data from 2 years ago that hasn't quite caught up with existing conditions, then GSA staff would review a fee appeal and make those corrections as needed and as appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Quick question. So with that contract, will that be done annually? Satellites and
we've done it for 5 years, so it won't have to be updated again. So yeah, that data will be coming out annually. So we have staff in all 4 of our region offices, scientists that go through that data for their region of the state and QA/QC it. And so some of that is comparing that data to high-res imagery we have, and then some of that is they actually go out and survey on the ground. They'll go look at the properties with, put eyes on them, and then update our database. So it's a bunch of different methods that are used to make sure it's pretty high-quality data. And we kind of use that internally on the water plan. So we do our own demand calculations, and kind of similar to the talk about the way you all calculate agricultural demand, we also take data from the water boards to kind of get a sense of surface water versus groundwater split. So if you ever look at those, our water plan data, and that's on a much bigger leg because there's a lot of analysis that goes into that, but that feeds into that data as well.
Great, thank you. We'll move now to 6D, updates from GSA partners on local projects. I believe we have Laura Garza Diaz from UC Cooperative Extension.
Thank you. So an update from the University of California Cooperative Extension, or UCCE, is that we are working on a proposal to update the 2008 inventory on agricultural consumptive use for the Ukiah Valley Basin. Just to give you a little bit of background, the first comprehensive study of this agricultural water use was done in 1986, and then it was updated in 2008 by UC Cooperative Extension. But now the current inventory, it's nearly 2 decades old, and we believe it must be refined and updated to show the current conditions of the basin. An update of this inventory will benefit the GSA by improving the accuracy and refinement of their water mass balance. As we learn from Audra, the agricultural water demands that are being using in that model is not using direct measurements for agriculture. So by doing this inventory, it will benefit and refine the model. And also, and in addition, it will support the GSA to be aligned with the SIGMA monitoring requirements that it needs to be done. So some of the objectives of this study are first of all, estimating the agricultural water use through direct in-field measurements, including irrigation measurements, estimating on-farm evapotranspiration, using soil sensors, using weather stations on farms, rather than relying on satellite-based models. The second point is that we want to analyze changes in viticulture and pear acreages, including their irrigation sources. We know there's a lot of, we don't know specifically how much it's going from surface water and how much is going to be turned into groundwater. So this is something that it needs to be refined and understand. And then the third objective is that we want to assess the impacts of droughts and wet conditions in the basin. I mean, 2 of the most intense droughts that had happened in the basin have occurred after 2008. We have the 2014 drought, which sparked SIGMA, and then we have the previous one in 2020. So it is essential to understand how these impacts of climate change are going to impact agricultural water use. So the UCC team is comprised of 3 advisors, a viticulture advisor, a water and soil advisor, and myself, a water and climate change advisor. We've designed an experimental study to be conducted over a 2 and ideally 3-year field campaign throughout 12 field stations throughout the northernmost to the southernmost part of the basin. During this campaign, we aim to install equipment, soil sensors, weather stations, flow meters, perform interviews, etc. So this is just an overall very high-level part of the proposal. And to move this proposal forward, we're actively seeking funding to support this project. We will like to explore the possibility of the GSA to fund part of this proposal or entirety of this proposal as it aligns with the GSA, or additionally having the GSA endorsement for any other funding sources that we could find. That's overall a very high level of the proposal. We are looking for feedback from the GSA and from other partners, but also getting some ideas of where we can get funding to start this project. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Director Watt?
Do you have an expectation of the budget for a project like this?
Yeah, so for the 3 years, it would be around $140,000 for the 3 years. If it's less, it could be around $100,000. It depends also on the type of equipment. If we want to purchase the equipment, then it will be for the GSA. But that's overall the cost. And it will, most of it is, or if not the entirety of it, it's for the equipment, since UCC is funded by university.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you, Laura.
Thanks.
All right, moving to item 7, future agenda items. For future agenda items, we have a JPA amendments, a fiscal year 25-26 budget development, fiscal year 25-26 rate development. Are there any comments from our general manager on these future agenda items?
No.
All right. We'll move for adjournment at 11:41. Thank you.